On January 6, 2021, a large crowd forced themselves into the United States Capitol. They thought of themselves as being patriots, proud patriots. Many were veterans who took an oath to protect the Constitution. They came from many disparate states. The crowd members consisted of several named groups, such as Proud Boys or Oath Keepers. No one has placed a definitive, precise estimate as to their numbers. By 2023, some 1,200 of the raiders had been identified and formally charged one way or another. Being charged or convicted in sentence is not the purpose of this discussion. For example, some claim they were indeed patriots and that they had been rallied for a just and deserving cause. Let me continue by saying outright that the number of raiders was 8,128 in total. Do you believe this precise number? Or do you think this is yet another example of misinformation? The number 8,128 does seem a bit too perfect an estimate of the rowdy crowd, doesn't it? Let's start with taking a look at much smaller numbers that are likely to be more accurate too. Then you can judge for yourself the reliability of the 8,128 estimate. Earlier, I cited two groups, Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. Both were cited as involved during the January 6, 2021 Capitol onslaught. Yet, there is another lesser-known group that participated. Wikipedia describes the group as, and I quote, "The 3%ers are a group that advocates gun ownership rights and resistance to the U.S. federal government." The group's name derives from the erroneous claim that the active forces in the field against the king's tyranny never amounted to more than 3% of the colonists during the American Revolution. End quote. The citation says that one of their members lit the fire that triggered the raid at the Capitol. According to the 3%ers dictum, now that about 33% of our population has guns, we are pretty secure from any invasion from within. But what about defending ourselves from outside invaders? For example, plans have been suggested to build a wall to prevent anyone from sneaking into America from Mexico. The proponents seem to think that a very high wall, properly patrolled, will finally put to rest the constant insecure feeling that suspect folks are sneaking into our well-protected land. Their concept of building this impenetrable wall suggests a very safe and secure solution to a problem that has been neglected for far too long. Before discussing yet another group, I pose a question. Is there a statistical correlation between groups who encourage gun ownership, such as the 3%ers, and who also encourage building this formidable wall? Before trying to answer this question, it's time to discuss yet another group, one that could be called the 98%ers. This entire discussion is about specific, unique numbers. Rational folks look over numbers before they make any decisions. For example, early on, a rather absurd number was thrown out. It was merely a conjecture that 8,128 folks stormed the Capitol on January 6, 2021. But more on that from Far From Perfect, Very Wild Guess later. For now, I'll take a look at this new number, the 98% number. What is it? One should be able to do the math on their own. However, I'll supply the answer. 2%, that's the old group, plus 98%, that's this group, equals 100%. If, and only if, the completely fail-safe wall is ever built, the taxpayer, whom I call the 2%ers, then will think that they have provided a great deal of security and snuffed out some invasion of immigrants that sneak in on a daily basis. That may not be the case. There is another group of folks that ponder this question. Just 2% of the U.S. border meets Mexico. So what about the 98% that remains completely underprotected? I call this group the 98%ers. North Korea has succeeded in making unmanned underwater drones. They can deliver bombs. Bombs are heavy. It seems reasonable that they can drop off anyone that they want to on some dark night near a Florida mangrove, a Maine rocky shore, or a California isolated beach. Sneaked-in agents are much lighter than a bomb. Not just agents, but more so-called illegal immigrants can come along for the ride in assorted drone submersibles. It seems reasonable that if sneaking in by land is preferred rather than the vast coast U.S. line, then migrants could gain entry through the, and I quote, the Canada-United States border that is the longest international border in the world of 5,525 miles, end quote. This quote is a wiki fact. The obvious solution is erecting another much longer wall, almost 3 times as long as the proposed Mexican wall, to deter the invasion. Thinking about the vast numbers of potential invaders, as well as their huge opportunities along the 3 major coastlines totaling close to 99,000 miles, the more rational 98%ers had developed a series of concerns as follows. To succeed, the minuscule 2% border to Mexico will require an enormous amount of surveillance in addition to the wall itself. For example, hot air balloons best operate in quiet, still air with little wind. It so happens that works well for transporting migrants over a wall on moonless nights. In Gaza, there was a surprising warren of tunnels that no one knew about. So it seems likely that tunnels will represent an alternative to climbing over or breaching a wall, and tunnels have the advantage of working in daylight. Finally, ultralight planes can carry 2 persons over short hops, such as a quick early dawn flight over any formidable wall. If all the specific concern weaknesses are addressed regarding the 2% Mexican border wall, then a far worse problem could emerge. Efforts will be redirected toward penetration of the remaining 98% of the border, which is mostly unguarded. It is known a tactical mistake in any warfare to avoid being surrounded by some real or supposed enemy. However, by expending a focused effort along the 2% thread, we invite sneakers to surround us and sneak in from any alternative direction of their choosing. Walls are helpful only for the non-coastal approaches. Building such a barrier along both the northern and Mexican approaches poses huge environmental issues when animal migrations are considered. They destroy natural scenic views. They require maintenance. It can be said that the last effective wall ever built was the Great Wall of China. Why even consider that option? The 98%ers ask. If walls were to be considered for any coastlines, their purpose would be deterring a different invasion. For example, the U.S. Army Corps suggested a group of seawalls to protect Miami from hurricane storm surges, not migrant caravans. The reaction was a storm of protest. One has to wonder about another question. Is there a statistical correlation between those who urge land-based walls and others who oppose seawalls? In summary, the 98%ers have significant concerns about the 2%ers' plans to seal the Mexican border. They have a classical warning about this plan. Watch out for what you wish for. Sealing the most popular Mexican border will likely have the negative effect of encircling the entire nation. The result is that we are surrounded by a 360-degree circle where invaders can pick and choose opportunistic areas and or weak spots to arrive undetected. A related question is, who are these invaders? Many politicians resort to fear-mongering and name-calling. Labels like rapists, drug dealers, and ex-cons are used as if each migrant is one of those cited. Others label them as asylum seekers, perhaps a more accurate label. But nonetheless, there is bound to be several ne'er-do-wells in any given group. Some countries hate the U.S. and would desire to sneak in agents or even terrorists. This seems a valid concern. Also, it seems that the most attractive option these foreign agents would use is the 98% of the U.S. that is not nearly as secure as the Mexican border supposedly will be if the 2%ers get their way. It is time for me to explain that I have a background in mathematics. That means I have concerns when others don't think about reliable data. Data is often presented using numbers. Thinking of the stark differences when one compares the 98%ers versus the 2%ers should cause others who don't think about quantitative facts some pause. For the remainder of my discussion, I will simply select a small set of 5 very special numbers. I use this set of numbers in order to model approximations as well as model a refreshing view of not just the U.S. that has worries about invaders, but the entire planet and how the global worries affect the U.S. The remaining numbers I will discuss are all collected together. They are called Pluperfect numbers. By discussing this set, I will address some earlier concerns. The 2020 census reported the U.S. population figure being 331,449,281. It is easy to find 10% simply by shifting the decimal point. So that means 10% of us is 33,144,928 souls rounded off. The 3%ers are satisfied that about 33% of us have guns. Doing more math, that means 109,378,263 humans hold guns in the U.S. I suggest asking a more relevant question. How many bullets does each gun owner possess? The reason for it being relevant is that it is not people, not guns, but instead bullets kill. It is easy to type in that "how many bullets" question on a computer, if for no other reason than to observe the wide variety of bizarre answers. Basically, there is no straightforward answer. However, the comments I observed mention per caliber, meaning the bullet size, and implying several guns in a household. There are some comments mention the number 1,000 bullets, as likely as any other estimate per gun. If anywhere near accurate, that means there are over 100 billion bullets available in the U.S. and at the ready. Every single one is capable of killing another human being. I have reached a point in this discussion to introduce the first of the 5 very special, easy to recognize and remember perfect numbers. It is 33,550,336. I have to say that this number is a representative estimate. By that I mean it isn't precise, but I like it anyway. Here I explain. In the 1990s, my late wife and I attended a Caribbean festival in nearby Dorchester, Massachusetts. The actual name of the festivities is a French Creole word pronounced joie veille, and it means daybreak. Following a night of parties, a fabulous parade proceeds down Blue Hill Avenue, featuring colorful traditional costumes from assorted Caribbean islands such as Haiti. Pleasant steel drum music is played for the onlookers, a drum beat that had been originated in Trinidad. The French Creole word spelled J''OUVERT even starts with the English word joy, and that truly represented the diverse community we visited. We had a wonderful time. We felt welcomed. In a news report recently, I read a comment in the Boston Globe about an event that happened during the last annual Joy Vey Festival. It reads, quote, "These individuals turned a celebration of Caribbean heritage and culture into a free fire zone with zero consciousness of where their bullets were flying or whom their bullets were hitting. Bullets kill." I took note in the same article that one culprit used a makeshift machine gun, a 9mm Glock pistol modified with a sear switch that makes the weapon fire repeatedly with one pull of the trigger. Another culprit used a so-called ghost gun during the firefight. I have reached the time in this discussion to defend my choice of the first Pluperfect number of the 5 totals. Recall that I chose 33,550,336. Here's my reasoning. I took note of the U.S. population cited earlier. I took 10% of it. I increased it until I reached a perfectly satisfying number that anyone can easily identify. 33,550,336. My rationale is that this magic number happens to be close to the 10% of all U.S. souls. In my humble opinion, that could be, and perhaps should be, the base percentage of Americans who own guns. Here I take an opposing view of the 3%ers who seem quite happy that 33% of us have guns and perhaps hope more should as well. None of the gun statistics mentioned in my discussion count 2 non-residential groups. The police of every form, local, state, etc. State Guard groups such as the Vermont National Guard that continues to this day to call themselves the Green Mountain Boys. When I suggested an acceptable base percent, I assumed that some range perhaps reaching 20%. I assumed that even the 3%ers would be happy to witness public festivals such as the Caribbean one I attended years ago without having punks armed with homemade guns and or modified machine guns. I assume that the 3%ers' goal is 1, no federal registration of firearms, and 2, some natural range of 10 to 20% of citizens that desire to possess a weapon is expected. Finally, 3, these fine citizens are historically akin to the Green Mountain Boys. In the event of our country is surrounded due to building the Mexican Wall, and therefore invaders or terrorists arrive from unpredictable directions, these private citizens who bear arms would form the ultimate resistance backup after the aforementioned State Guard troops, local or state police call for assistance. I now move to another of the 5 numbers. It's the third one. Again, I am in descending order of magnitudes. This special number has some natural significance and inherent mathematical property. The number I have chosen is 496. Indeed, now that I think of it, the last 3 special numbers, starting with 496, all have some direct or indirect tie-in to nature, but not the nature most people think about. Not the beauty of sunsets, for example, not rainbows nor shooting stars, not waterfalls nor brilliant rocky gems. Our combined profound appreciation of nature, of God's handiwork, is generally appreciated by gazing at beauty by means of our sense of vision. But there are 7 other senses. Quite a few humans would prefer, for example, sounds, profound sounds, historically classical music, Mozart, Beethoven, and others who composed as if translating God's voice for us to hear. Call them nerds, if you care to, but others discern God's work when they get puzzled, and then actually find fascinating answers to puzzles in pure mathematics or math that you can, for example, touch. That math involves geometry. The number 496 solves a geometry puzzle, if you will. In ancient times, BCE times, the humans were puzzled by certain regular shapes. The reason? They understood and identified merely 5 of them. The puzzle remains to the present time. Are there any more? Plato ventured into naming the 5 special shapes. I won't try to name them formally. Informally, the 3 wooden blocks at the bottom of the cover of a book titled The Casted Eye have an intriguing and very special relationship. Indeed, certain calculations cited in the book describe the implications of this relationship. A calculated number used, you may have guessed, is 496. After identifying the relationship, the text addresses the many implications of handling issues about gun control. Of interest to the 3 percenters is that the text does not urge any federal registration nor suggest taking away the right to bear arms. The text presents a completely fresh plan acceptable by all that, for example, would have reduced or eliminated any probability of the so-called firefight that occurred at last summer's Joyve Festival. The fundamental assumption is that most of society would agree that punks needn't hold their grievances at any given public parade, and most of society would agree that a deranged man should not take out his madness by executing 18 folks in Lewiston, Maine. 28, yes, 28. Remember, we're traveling down the number scale. We just took a big leap down from 496, way down to 28. What is so special about this number? And more importantly, how does it play into some of the concerns I mentioned earlier by the 98 percenters? Like 496, does 28 have some God-given natural meaning? Taking trivia first. In case you didn't know, 28 is the number of dominoes in a standard domino set. A trivial fact: there are 28 non-equivalent ways of expressing 1,000 as the sum of 2 prime numbers, and mathematicians think it is unlikely that any other number has this property. More than any other number, the number 28 is related to our moon, signifies a duration of significant time that differs from the day-to-day mundane range. We world citizens need to think like the indigenous peoples and ask ourselves, how many moons do we have before taking proper action? How do we manage a proper earth shot? The text doesn't directly try to answer this question, but suggests a proper model by explaining a simpler problem we can easily address. I have reached the point where I can finally introduce the last Pluperfect number. It is 6. Plato did something unusual. He assigned names to those stupid wooden blocks on the text cover that I mentioned earlier. What at first blush seems a stupid name needs time to think about, ponder about. Maybe it will take days to sink in. He appears to be right on, as the Block series is the hexahedron. You know it is a simple cube, perhaps one of the pair of dice called a die. Plato had the audacity to name that six-sided object his earth element. Gosh, how wrong could he be? Here I present his prescient reasons. Plato must have known that we must change our worldview. So he minimized vast areas such as the Pacific Ocean and crunched our world into 6 faces of a cube. His model shows but 6 sizable land segments. Some call these continents. He evidently knew the term earthshot before now King Charles came up with the term. But to Plato, just like the king's alarming term, Plato understood the term as viewed by a different disaster than the impending overheated climate change royal view. The 6 faces of the sides of the cube represented vast land masses that, just in case our wonderful moon suddenly plummeted to Earth, i.e. a weird moonshot, each land mass may actually remain, although not much of Antarctica or Australia. By tightening up the model, where anyone could sneak over an edge and reach an adjacent landmass, he knew well ahead of us that we have to deal with, in addition to climate control, folks from some other continent. He doesn't suggest a solution in his model. He merely shrinks it down for us world citizens to understand terms like migration, asylum, invaders, terrorists, etc. We need to understand these different terms. Thank you, Plato. This completes my discussion about the 5 interesting pluperfect numbers that, as a side benefit, introduce folks to 5 very unique but little understood geometric solids that Plato knew about, and today's folks should know more about, in my opinion. The numbers seem to have some natural consequences, as well as certainly the solids do. What is left for me to explain is a promise I made. I told anyone who might care these numbers are extremely easy to always know about. How so? Here's the clue. All 5 are perfect. I do not expect y'all to memorize them. I do expect you can grab any mobile device or any computer and make a simple query as shown here. Tell me the first 5 perfect numbers. I typed the tell me and observed my result. What I failed to do is explain why they are my favorite pluperfect numbers. I will do that now. I assume you have heard that word before, maybe in some middle school grammar class. You know, nouns, verbs, subjects, and so on. I guess that half of the middle school students didn't favor math, while half despised grammar. Oh well, I'm not here to teach either subject, but I take liberty to explain an adjective that isn't used much. It is pluperfect. The meaning is literally more than perfect. How can anything be more than perfect? Isn't perfect perfection itself? These 5 perfect numbers suited my goal as more than perfect for introducing folks to social issues. These issues appear in the book series and include community, water security, climate control, population issues such as migration, and especially in the above text, the fresh solution to manage gun control better.